turn these lights off here. I'll find it in a minute. There's only 3 switches. I hit it 5 of them. two 2 weeks ago, I left off with a couple verses left over in chapter 11. So I'm going to go through them rather quick, and I'm probably will only get about 6 verses into chapter 12. I will say, before I start, I, I think Gary's heard me say this, but chapter divisions and verse divisions in the Bible came about the time of the printing press, which is 500 years, 600 years ago. They were not originally in the text. This was wrote as a letter, and sometimes the divisions really don't fall in a good spot. And I kind of think that this probably should have, this part of chapter 11 should probably have been included with chapter 12. But, they were put in there just so when the pastor up front says turn to John 3:16, we all turn to the same spot. But I kind of have a love-hate relationship with them because I understand their usefulness, but I also see where sometimes people will divorce chapter 2 from chapter 3 because the next chapter they forget or don't attach what happened in the previous verses. You know what I'm saying? Paul did not write John 1, chapter 1, verse 1, verse 2. He didn't write it like that.
That's what you're saying is sometimes the chapter divisions are in the middle of the thought.
Yes. Well, you see this in Isaiah 53. The thought really starts in the last 2 or 3 verses of chapter 52. But, anyways,
The seventh angel sounded, there were a great voice in heaven saying, the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders sitting before God on their thrones fell on their faces and worshiped God.
the word kingdoms here should be singular. Just about every text, it's kingdom, the kingdom of the world. This world is becoming Christ or the Messiah's. He is about to reign, he is taking over. The seventh angel sounds a trumpet here, but we're not really, we're kind of in an interlude that's building up to, I think, chapter 14, where we start seeing the results of this trumpet, which will be the 7 bowl judgments, the final God pouring out his judgment. Up till this point, he's judging, but he's trying to get people's attention. By the bowls, you get, these people are not going to respond to him, in my opinion. They're,
Last chance.
yeah. When the 7th seal was broken, backing up a few chapters, there was silence in heaven. They were aghast. When this 7th angel sounded, everybody is up and cheering. The Bible, all the way from the beginning, has been building to this time when God is going to fix what went wrong in Genesis. And you look at the proclamation. The heavenly host is seeing this is about to happen. I can't remember where it is in the Bible. It talks about the angels watching us to learn how God's going to work things. They're cheering. They're seeing it coming to pass.
Saying, we thank you, O Lord God Almighty, who are, and who was, and who is coming, because you took your great power and reigned. And the nations were full of wrath, and your wrath came, and the time of the judging of the dead, and to give the reward to your servants, the prophets and the saints, and to the ones fearing your name, to the small and to the great, and to destroy those destroying the earth.
This part in yellow is pulled from Psalms 2. And I refer to Psalms 2 so much, I really just decided we'd read it. Because I'm going to probably refer to it again before this hour's over with. So, can you read that one?
Yet, why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bones in pieces, bodies in pieces, and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall hold them in
Derision.
derision. Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. I will declare and decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nation for your inheritance, and the end of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash these to pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore be wise, O king, be instructed, you judge of the earth, serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angered, and you perish in the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Bless all those who have put their trust in him.
What do you hear when you read that? Just this is the story of, I guess, humanity. We're constantly trying to fight God off of things and take possession of what ultimately belongs to his son. You know, where we don't want his rule, we want to usurp. We want to rule our own lives. And he laughs at us. And then he says, you know, the son's coming. He's coming with wrath. Go make peace with the son today before his wrath is kindled. That's one of my favorite psalms, really. But you shall break them with the rod of iron. We'll come back to that. But we've got a theme, and I really just pulled some verses. I could have pulled a lot more, but I got to move through this. But you know, Daniel 2:34 through 35. This is Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You know, he saw the statue, the head of gold, the body, and then it kind of got it. The quality of the metals and stuff, or the value, was less and less. I think the body was bronze, the legs were iron, and then the feet were a mixture of iron and clay. But then at the end of it, what he saw was a stone that was cut without hands, which struck the image upon its feet, which were of iron and clay, and it broke them to pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, and the silver and the gold were broken, and they became like chaff of the summer threshing floor. Chaff, when you're separating your wheat from the chaff is the part you don't want. It's like the husk versus the corn. You know, keep the corn, the husk gets burned or fed to the animal. It's destroyed. The wind carries it away, and said you get on the Temple Mount is actually built on an old threshing floor. You would throw the wheat up in the air, and the wind, if you did it right, the wheat would pile up here, and the chaff you'd have two separate piles. The wind would kind of help separate it. You burnt the chaff to keep rafts down. The stone, no place was found for these kingdoms, and that stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. There is a constance referring to Christ as being the stone cut without hands, or the cornerstone that the builders rejected. In the time of this last kingdom, he's going to come and destroy it and set up his own. I think that's a continuation. And in the days of these kings, this God of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall crush and destroy all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. I believe that is where Daniel is interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The fulfillment of these prophecies is what you're starting to see at this point. There's also a reference to Zechariah 14:9. But I got to move on.
And the temple of God was open in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his covenant. And there occurred lightning and voices and thunder and an earthquake and a great hail.
In verse 15, we see the trumpet sound, although we will not see the results on earth until chapter 16. In my notes, I said 14. But there's a temple in heaven, and the real Ark of the Covenant is in heaven. What Moses made was a replica. You have reference to this in Hebrews 9:23, and I kind of scratch my head a little on that. Is God's in heaven? Why has he got a temple? But I don't know. But I don't, you sit there and ponder some of this, and you're like, there's a temple in heaven. Yeah, well, I can understand the throne, but you got, I don't know. This is my thoughts. You go to a temple to worship God. God is there.
Maybe he lives in the temple.
I would love to dig more into that, but I got to move on. You sometimes when you're doing this, you get rabbit trails that go off all over kind of directions, and you'll look up and 2-3 hours have gone by if you're not careful chasing a rabbit trail that doesn't really bear fruit. That closes out chapter 11. Chapter 12 is an interesting chapter. I thought it was. Chapter 12, in a sense, is a summary of the whole Bible and history from a heavenly point of view. It puts the spiritual war into context. In a sense, it also is a playing out of Psalm 2 earlier, which is why I had included it. But in the book of Revelation, we see 4 women. And I'm not, this is, I guess, typological. Women are often used in the Bible to symbolize religion. Out of these 4 women, 2 of them are good, and 2 of them are bad. First, we had Jezebel back in the letter to Thyatira. She represented false church, false teachings, heretical doctrines being entered. We have the harlot coming up in a few more chapters. She represents some kind of false religious system. We have the bride of Christ, which will be talked about in chapters 19, 21. And then we have this woman in chapter 12. But since I'm going to talk about her in just a minute, I won't talk about her now. We have 7 main characters that appear in chapter 12 and will appear in chapter 13. We have this mysterious woman. We have a great red dragon. And I really spent some time trying to figure out why it referred to him as a dragon. But we have this male child that shows up. Then we have Michael the archangel. We have a remnant. And then we have a beast of the sea and a beast that comes out of the earth. So we're going, over this week and next week, work on who these people are.
There appeared a great sign in the heavens, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon was under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. And having a babe in womb, she cried, being in travail, having been distressed to bear.
So notice this is a great sign. It's a woman clothed with the sun. She's about to give birth.
Another sign was seen in the heavens, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his head.
The woman was a great sign. The dragon is just a sign.
And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and cast them onto the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman being about to bear, so that when she bare he might devour her child.
So we got a woman. She's pregnant. She's in childbirth. And this dragon shows up and he's about to take her child. Or he desires to possess her child.
He bore his son, a male, who is going to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up of God and to his throne.
Child.
And the woman flew into the wilderness, where she had a feast prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
And there's a lot going on in those 6 verses, isn't there?
You know, you can read Revelation, and of course it's a sign, it's a vision, but I always think that was the birth of Christ. And it could be Herod. Herod was after, and so they fled to Egypt. You know,
Yeah. Well, there's
which would be the wilderness, fled to Egypt. And, but you know, like Revelation is a vision, it's sign, they use stuff like dragons and stuff, you know, to represent stuff.
one of the things with Revelation. Okay, when you get into Greek, which I should pull it up, Greek has, once again, it has no chapter divisions. It has no punctuation. It has, it's wrote all together, so you have to parse the text. Well, Revelation was wrote at a time when the Septuagint was the predominant translation. You get about 6, 7, 800 years afterwards where the Latin Vulgate was the predominant translation. Some of your scholars started trying to correct John's grammar because it seemed just so bad, but they weren't familiar with the Septuagint. When you become familiar with the Septuagint, John in the middle of verses will suddenly quote from the Septuagint. That is his way of doing quotation marks, so he's constantly referring you back to the Old Testament to understand these things. Some of the problems I see today is the church doesn't know the Old Testament. This, which I'm getting to, is referring back to things in the Old Testament. The views, these are the 4 basic views people will have with who the woman is. I was listening to this morning to a Seventh-day Adventist who was going hard on it was the church. And it's like, well, if this is the church, there's a problem because the church did not give birth to the Messiah.
Yeah.
We are the offspring. We are his followers. He gave birth to us in a sense. We're built on his foundation. But Eve, in the sense that it is a reference to the Genesis 3:15, the seed of the serpent, the seed of the woman. I can kind of see Eve, but I think it's a little bigger picture. And Mary is the mother of Christ, but this seems to be talking about something larger than Mary. I'm going to say I agree with a lot of people. It's Israel, but Israel looked at as she was the fulfilling of the promises starting with Genesis 3:15. But, is Isaiah 9:6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. Well, Isaiah is saying here's which he's referring to the descendant of David, but a child has been given to us. He's talking to Israel. Isaiah 7:14, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and he will be called Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God living with us. In Revelation 12:1, Israel is seen not as she has been or is now, but as she will be. It is the nation of God as he intended her to be, when a condition that will be fulfilled in the reign of her Messiah. When the child who is Christ was born, the people of Israel were not in a place of power and dignity, but under the yoke of the Roman domination. That's Liberty Bible commentary. So, what did the woman, let's go back, she had 12 stars, she was clothed with the sun and the moon. Like I said, let's run back to the Old Testament. Where do we find that?
So you kind of lean towards Israel being, yeah, that's what I've been taught. That's what all the study I've been doing. I can't see it being Mary. And you take
Mary in the sense that she's part of Israel, but it's not just if it's talking about her, where did, that's,
Here's what I'm talking about Satan's cast heaven at
Well, I mean, one of the verses there, the stars are angels.
We gotta remember, it may not be all in perfect order either. We're dealing with a man that was just writing as fast as he could and everything that was coming.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot. There's a lot in this chapter, but Genesis 37, 5 through 11, Joseph's dreams. Do you remember Joseph's dreams? He was young, and he probably should not have went and told his brothers his dreams, but both the dreams, they were all going to bow to him. But the first dream deals with the chiefs, and his grew up taller. But the second dream, he sees the sun and the moon and the 11th stars. He would be the 12th star. He tells Jacob this dream, and Jacob actually interprets it. He looks at it and says, "Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" Well, what is he saying? He's saying that Jacob and Rachel, or his wives, are the sun and the moon, and the 12 stars are the 12 progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. So now we go back to the woman, and she's clothed in the sun and the moon and has 12 stars. It's referring back to that dream. She is the descendant of Jacob and his wives. The woman and her child is a fulfillment of the promise of Genesis 3:15 and the Abrahamic covenant. The whole world would be blessed through Abraham, through one of his offsprings. You know, Ishmael received the promise. I'm not Ishmael. Isaac received the promise. Ishmael didn't. The promise was the eventual coming of the Messiah. It was given to Jacob. Jacob gave it to Judah, and then it gets given to David, and it's this promise that the Messiah would come through this line and bless the whole world. Okay. Just throw up this idea of Israel kind of like being God's wife is all through the Bible. In fact, it's rather, a lot of times it's like an adulterous wife. But Isaiah 54:5, for the Maker is your husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer, the God of the whole earth he is called. Does everybody know when you see Lord in all capitals in your Old Testament, that's where the unpronounceable name of God originally occurred? You know, the Tetragrammaton, some Bibles will say Jehovah, which we pretty well know could not be the pronunciation of that, but you know, the unpronounceable name of God would be right there. So then Isaiah 66:7 through 8, before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such a thing? Shall a land be born in one day? Shall a nation be brought forth in one moment? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she brought forth her child. That has other prophetic implications, but we're not going to chase that rabbit trail at this moment.
That's something, I'm in the New Testament now, and when Mary had Jesus, it never did say anything about labor. She never did really experience labor. Of course, she was, you know, she didn't know no man either. She was born with the Holy Ghost,
Yeah.
or he was born. She was, you know,
I'd have to look.
But it don't say anything about labor. She didn't have a
I'd have to look because you
I don't
got
think
Luke.
you'll find it unless it's in John.
No, the story of Jesus' birth is in Luke and Matthew. But I look.
Look and see.
Two more verses. Micah 4:10. Behold, and be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in birth pangs. For now you shall go forth from the city, you shall dwell in the field. Into Babylon you shall go, there you shall be delivered, for the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. And do we pretty well Micah 2? I think Micah 2:5, 2 through 3 is read about every Christmas, right? We're familiar with that one. Bethlehem, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be the ruler in Israel, whose going forth are from old, from everlasting. So there's going to be one born in Bethlehem who's young, but yet he's old. He is everlasting. He existed from before. Therefore he shall give them up until the time that she who is in labor has given birth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return to the children of Israel. And the tie-in to Bethlehem, well, that's what the book of Ruth is all about. It is possible that Jesus was born in the fields that Boaz or Ruth was gleaning in, but that's opinion.
There's another thing about the Bible. Sometimes sentence you put before this sentence, put after this sentence to explain something. But then when they wrote it with the chapters and the verses and everything, that didn't get explained to us. So that's where sometimes it gets a little confusing. You got to back up and read.
Yeah.
You know, there's one in Revelations 12 and 10. When you get there, you'll see it. You got to read real close.
Oh yeah. I I have a love-hate relationship with the chapter verse because I mean I learned that over time, but to begin with, I made some of those same errors where you diverse. You read, everybody knows John 3:16. Nobody knows John 3:15 and 3:17, and it's referring back to the statue that of the snake, brass serpent that Moses stood up in the wilderness. Nobody ever told me about that when I was first reading the Bible. It's like, you gloss over it, but after you read the Bible 2 or 3 times, you start remembering these things and I had somebody I was listening to point out about the brass serpent, and it's the context, but
That's like when I do my sermon sometimes. I'll get halfway done page and then I'll have something to say, but then I have to draw an arrow back up to the top of the page in between the two lines.
yeah. But remember, coming back to this, we have our 7 players or characters. I'm saying I pretty well believe the woman represents Israel in a typological, because she is who the Messiah would come out of. You know, starting back at Eve, it represents the fulfilling of those promises that the Messiah would come. Okay. Now we have the dragon. And I really was trying to figure out, okay, because that's the Greek word dragon. What is the Hebrew word? And I run out of time on that. But
I found where there's kind of an answer to that question about Mary having pain. It said here that many fathers of the church and theologians down through the centuries deemed it fitting that Mary alone would be exempt from such pains as a sign of her unique holiness.
it sounds like a little bit of Catholicism there.
Right. So that, as far as the Bible, I hadn't seen anything in Scripture but I will search it out.
Okay.
There may be some who never be able to answer.
Yeah, it's
Right.
true.
Right.
And, the focus is the child. Mary's the mother of the child, but the child is the one that will save us. So it's,
Another thing, the Bible a lot of times don't go in great detail
Right.
about
Yeah, because I know they talk about that all women are supposed to go through pain when they give birth because of his sin. So,
Mary had sinner. A lot of Catholics won't tell you that.
right.
the
But
Catholics,
Mary was just a girl.
yeah, the Catholics have her up on a pedestal.
Mhm.
Right. She was just a normal 13-year-old girl, 12, 13-year-old girl,
Yeah.
minding her own business.
And it's kind of ironic as you get in the Bible talking about Mary. All women wanted to be the mother of the Messiah, but then you look at the Mary, and no woman would want to go what she went through as far as the way society would have treated her. So you got to be careful. Sometimes that desire, there's a little more information there that,
the Bible does say that Mary would be the most blessed.
yes,
of all.
but that didn't mean it was an easy cakewalk. I mean, to the society, she got pregnant out of wedlock. And you'll run into that in John chapter 8, I believe, where the Pharisees accused Jesus. We were not born, we know who our father is. We were not born with, I can't quote it exactly, but they're making an accusation that he is a born out of wedlock, which go back to the Old Testament. A bastard child shall not inherit until the 10th generation, which some look at as a curse. It's actually a prophecy. But anyways, we have, and I listed this down in chapter 12. These are the 6 different names or descriptions of this being. First, it's a red dragon. Red is the color is only seen twice in the book of Revelations. Both times it's war, destruction, and death. The serpent of old. I picked that up immediately. That's referring back to Genesis chapter 3. Satan. I believe that's a Hebrew word coming into Greek, means the accuser or the adversary. Devil is the Greek word diablos, and it's slanderer or traitor, and it's probably the Greek word for Satan, or the Greek word for the word.
He's all that rolled up in one.
Yeah, well, I say it like this, okay? Yaakov is James. Yaakov is Jacob. Jacob and James are the same root name. One of them comes through the Greek into English, and the other comes through the Hebrew into English. Yeshua is Joshua. Joshua comes out of the Hebrew into English. In Greek, it's Iesus, which becomes Jesus. So Jesus and Joshua are the same name out of different languages. And there is a point in the King James where it says Joshua instead of Jesus, and it's referring to the other. I'd have to find it. But some of these problems you do run into because, if you're reading it from the Greek and you're reading the book of Joshua and the Septuagint, it's Jesus did this, Jesus did that. It's the same name, it's coming out of a different language. But this is the being that deceived the whole world, or deceiver, and the accuser of our brethren.
Can't we look at that the same way that, like, Sister Shelley and them come, if they were speaking in Spanish, they would say Jesus or Jesus.
Yeah,
And so these are just language barriers here
yeah.
that these old time men that were putting all this together,
Well, I believe
this from that.
Diablo is also Spanish for devil, but
Right.
it's the Greek word for devil, but I believe in Spanish it is diablo as well. But a little off topic, but I found this hilarious because I was chasing down the word diablo in your word studies. If you later on in your turn to 1 Timothy 3:11, and it says women are not to be slanderers. The word slanderer is diablos in Greek. So women, you're not to be the devil. I found that kind of hilarious last night. Okay, this great dragon, he's got 7 heads and 7 diadems, which is I said before, Stephanos is a earned crown like you would earn at the Olympics. Diadem is a crown that you don't earn, that you possess. So this being has 7 crowns that he owns somehow. Satan has this world for a time, and we learn in Luke chapter 4, verses 5 through 7, he can give it to whoever he will. He offered Jesus a shortcut. Jesus turned him down. The 10 horns, that's a reference back to Daniel chapter 7. Okay. Chapter 7 is a very interesting chapter. I'm going to do a brief summary of the last kingdom. But the fourth beast was dreadful. It was unlike anything he had seen, and it bothered Daniel. An angel came to translate what Daniel had seen, and in verse 23, he told him, this fourth beast is a kingdom that will be different from all others before it. This kingdom will devour the whole earth. No kingdom has ever possessed the whole earth, though you could say Napoleon tried, Hitler tried, the Japanese were trying. Through history, the closest we've come to is probably the Romans, and they didn't possess the Far East. They didn't get into South Africa. They got into England up to Scotland, but then they built Hadrian's Wall, and they didn't mess with those Scottish people.
The Chinese, Jesus' name is Tiana. Tiana.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is English version of
Well, names are just.
what's coming about.
Yeah, I've said it before. Names are descriptive. Your first time you read a name, Adam is man, Isaac is laughter. It's a descriptive phrase that they become known by, and then it.
We have to be careful because we do speak English and we just naturally assume English is it. It's number one, it's set in stone.
It is.
But our English language is a mess. It's a messy language.
Very, because it's a combination of Latin, French, and the Germanic, with a whole bunch of other words added into it too. English is probably one of the most difficult language for a non-English speaker to ever try to learn, because it takes words from other languages and tries to force them into a Germanic subject, verb, object, word order. But back to this being that Daniel seen, it will trample and destroy the whole earth, breaking it into pieces. And then there's 10 horns that rose up. And the angel tells him these are 10 kings that are going to come out of this kingdom. And then an 11th horn rose up and subdued 3 of these rulers. And this 11th horn had eyes of a man and spoke proud, boastful words against God. And he will persecute those who belong to God. he will, the saints were giving over into his hand, and here we come with that times and half. Here's that 3.5 year period again, which I will do more next week.
That means he has eyes as a man sees in carnality.
I think this is referring to what we would commonly call the Antichrist. But he will attempt to change the times and the laws. And I think that even goes more into not just like speeding laws or anything. That's the laws of nature, or the laws of, man and woman should be together. No, what we see going on today.
Yeah, we see
Yeah.
a lot of it going on now.
God's laws, 10 Commandments.
Basically, all of our laws come from the Bible.
And they're being attacked left and right now. This one horn, he will have power over the saints for 3.5 years. I think I just said that. And then the Ancient of Days will come and destroy him and rule with the saints. And I go back to Luke chapter 4. Satan is kind of seen as the force behind a lot of things, kingdoms that go on today. I mean, my mind goes to Nazi Germany. I mean, one of the ironies, and you get to study in the Holocaust, is as the Russians were coming, and the kingdom of Nazi Germany is falling, you'd think that you'd get the people, it'll give up on the running the ovens that were killing the Jews. No, they doubled down. They started trying to kill them faster. You'd think you'd want to protect the homeland. These people, you've done wasted them away. There was something deeper going on there, in my opinion. Okay. So pretty well, Satan is the dragon. He is represented by a dragon in this. And as I was getting to the something deeper, Satan has been working to stop or destroy the coming of the Messiah since Genesis and the fall. Eve, I think I went over this several weeks or months ago. Eve knew that a descendant of hers was going to fix what her and Adam messed up. She had her first son, Cain. She believed he was going to fix it. Satan immediately went to corrupting Cain. By Genesis 6, we have the whole line corrupt to where Noah is the only one that's left righteous. So we had the flood. We had to start over. I skip ahead. I got the destruction of the male line in the beginning of Exodus 1. Moses was saved. He was put on Pharaoh wanted to destroy all the male children because they were looking for that one that was going to come and save them. They were reading or referring to what the promises that had been given down. Moses was saved by one of the Pharaoh's sisters, daughters. I'd have to go back and look. Chapter 14. After all the plagues, Pharaoh finally says, "Go, Moses," and then changes his mind and pursues them to the ocean to wipe them out. And Pharaoh got wiped out. Genesis 12:6. Abraham is told that his descendants are going to inherit the land that he was brung in. But the sin had not reached the point he had to judge the Canaanites. Well, he's told there's going to be 400 years. You're going to go into another country, and in 400 years, your descendants are going to come back. When they come back, they're talking about Nephilim being in the land. Satan had 400 years to build up an obstacle to them taking the land. He's trying to stop them. Jeroboam kills his brothers. The blood curse, I think I went over that a couple weeks ago. You know, the Messiah's got to come through David's line. Well, God pronounces a blood curse on the line of David. Well, so the male line of David can't inherit. Jesus is born a virgin. Joseph is his legal father, but it's not his actual father. Mary is a descendant of David, so he is a descendant of David both legally and biologically, but the blood curse is skipped because the bloodline descending from Jeconiah did not inherit. You know, we get into the New Testament. Joseph's fears. Mary's pregnant. Need I say more? When the Magi come riding in, the thing you got to understand with Herod's father had played political favors with with the Caesars, Pompey and Augusta. He came to their aid at a vital point in some battle, and his reward for that was he was appointed as ruler under Rome for the Holy Land. Descendant, he was an Edomite. He was a Jewish convert, or his family was, but the Jews, the ruler has to descend from the line of David. So these people showing up, and it wasn't just 3 wise men, it was probably a large entourage going, where is he who has born King of the Jews? That's a threat to Herod. If there was somebody born from the line of David that was rightfully king, that the people, David would lose, or Herod would lose the support he was fighting to get. He was so paranoid he had killed 2 or 3 of his wives and half his kids, thinking they were a threat to him. And then these Magi come riding in going, where is he who's born King of the Jews? Herod took off after him.
Like you said, it's quite a big group of people because they did not travel alone. It was too dangerous for 3 wise men to travel with no kind of protection of a caravan.
Oh yeah. Well, they brung, I think, 3 gifts, and people see the 3 gifts and apply it to 3 wise men, but it does not say how many came. But the 2 storms at sea, Mark 4, Luke 8, the Sea of Galilee should really be called a lake. It's not maybe the size of Lake Eufaula. You get some whitecaps out there, but it's not like being out in the ocean. And Jesus rebuked whatever was causing it, and it settled down. There's something possibly unnatural going on.
Like, Sea of Galilee, you can see from one side to the other, really.
Yeah.
This is that. I mean, it was big, but it wasn't.
I know on the St. Johns River, there's a lake called Lake Jordan, and most of the lake is so shallow, within 12 to 15 feet, and there's a deeper channel. When the wind starts blowing, I said we had a 42-foot boat, and the deck was a good 8 to 10 feet off the amount of water. And we went out in it one day when it was rough, and I seen the nose of our boat going down and picking up water. And so just a storm, that lake gets rough. And it's because of the shallowness of it. So it's very believable.
Well, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying there's more going on behind the scenes. I mean, it had to be something what, 3, 4 of the disciples were fishermen who were used to fishing that lake. It had to be something big enough to scare them. You know, it wasn't just a little. But the cross, Satan's ultimate attempt to stop the Messiah, got him framed and killed. 3 days later, he rose. Ooh, 5 minutes. Now, we got the woman, we got the dragon. The child is easy. We've got a male child. She's born from the woman, destined to rule all the nations. Will rule with a rod of iron. Go back to Psalm 2 earlier. This child is pursued by the dragon and is called up to the throne of God. Acts, first chapter. Afterwards, the dragon seeks to destroy the woman. He seeks to destroy the child. See, that's not good English. He sought to destroy the child before the child was called up, and when he couldn't get the child, he tries to destroy the offspring of the child and the woman. Which goes back to what I was saying about the Holocaust. One of the requirements for the Messiah to come back is the nation that rejected him has to realize, repent, and call for their Messiah to come back. Jesus says this when he's coming into Jerusalem. It says it in Hosea 5:15. It says it in Isaiah 53. I could think of some other places if I sit here long enough. If Satan could destroy the Jewish nation, he would have thwarted God's plan. He's still trying to do what I had in the previous slides. You know, and also Luke chapter 1, verse 32, Mary was told that her child would sit on David's throne. You realize he has not sat on David's throne yet? I'm trying to hurry. So, the woman, nation of Israel, the dragon, Satan, the male child is the Messiah, Jesus. We still have 4 more characters. And that's a repeat of the last verse if you want to read it again.
Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a feast prepared by God that they shall flee from there 1,260 days.
So this is where I'm going to have to end it. But this is what I will try to cover next week. Where is she going? What is the 1,260 days? There's references all through the Bible of this time period. And who are the other 4 characters on the previous slide?